And welcome back to WMMBAM.com, our video on demand section, as we've got sitting state representative John Tobia. In what district, John? 30.
I'm currently in 31, running for 53.
Now you're running for the newly created District 53, correct, largely in Palm Bay. You've been in the job 4 years in that District 31 seat. What changes when you move to District 53? Demographics of the district, number one.
Well, first of all, I have moved. I no longer own property in District 31. I've moved now into the newly created District 53. But the demographics are greatly shifting from a district that is strongly Republican to one that leans not only independent but performance-wise is a little bit to the D side.
All right, very good. Does it change, and we talked about this on the air, but this is for folks who maybe didn't get to hear the interview on the air. Does it change what you're doing, how you're doing it, as far as campaigning goes? Demographics are different.
The message is got to stay the same. I think you've got to be leery of anyone that tailors their message based on whether or not they're running in a primary or a general election, whether they're running in a conservative or a liberal-leaning district. I have a message out there, and if it resonates, wonderful, and if it doesn't, then there's another candidate in this race to choose. So I'm not willing to change my platform or change my beliefs to fit a different district. If you have those beliefs, you'll get a competent representative who believes that.
All right, very good. Let's talk about what you perceive as the most important issues for this district that you now want to represent.
Across the state, but maybe a little bit more in particular in Brevard County. Thankfully, not as much in South as North Brevard County, but the economy and jobs is definitely a very important issue. It's not the state of Florida's job to create employment. It's to create an environment that is conducive to job creation, and we've begun to do that under the Scott administration by giving him a number of resources as far as less regulation and more dollars to go up on behalf of the state of Florida to other states and bring these type of employment opportunities to the state of Florida. We've also cut the state corporate income tax here with a deduction from zero when I was elected to $50,000 this past year. We increased it from 25 to 50. And what this does is help about 12,000 small businesses in the state of Florida, because that's where our growth is going to be immediately as well as long-term with the small businesses out there.
All right, very good. If you'll grab that headset, you're going to need it because we're going to go to the telephones and take a call. We've got Megan joining us from Melbourne. Megan, good morning. You're on with John Tobia.
Good morning. I just had a quick question. I was wondering if you were thinking about relooking at the fees that were all raised in the past couple of years for hunting and fishing license, as well as our vehicle registrations, all that kind of stuff. I mean, it was advertised as not a tax, but in my world, anything that's raised is considered a fee. It's also a tax. And when those of us are trying to struggle, and it's kind of ironic when you put something like on a hunting license and fishing licenses and stuff, and that's some of the ways that people make ends meet, and now we're paying more for even the license.
All right, hang on here and listen, because you won't be able to hear it unless you're with us on the phone, Megan. John, your answer there.
Unfortunately, and I think you're absolutely right, the state of Florida was facing major budget shortfalls, and the legislature, me included, and I take full responsibility for that, made what was the wrong decision. We tried to justify it, I tried to justify it, and I didn't do a very good job. And I think the state of Florida needs to look at this when these extra dollars come through, because this is something that is going to impact Republicans, Democrats across the board. And what the projections are going to be about flat this year, but it's looking, though, over the course of the next couple of years that we're going to see an uptick. And I would certainly like those resources to be focused in for these type of fees and I could give you the justification for the fishing fees, that this was the federal government that mandated we do certain things, but the state of Florida could have come in and offset that very, very, very easily. And we need to do a better job to mitigate these type of things that we put on the backs of voters. What we did this past year was a 3% pay-in for retirement. We asked state employees, we forced state employees to pay part of their retirement. We should have probably done that, and with the governor's leadership, we did that this past term, but we probably should have done that initially, and that 3%, in all honesty, probably should have been 5%, so we could have offset many of those fees that we increased. A mistake was made.
Okay, well, that's a clarification that some state employees have brought to my attention, saying, look, it would have been great if they'd have put this money into the pensions like they're saying they were going to, but it went to do other things in the budget. Are these dollars from the state employees actually going to their pensions, or is it being done to offset other costs in the budget?
We're putting it in the pension, but what that means is now we have more free dollars to go do other things with. So, it's the same with the lottery. When the lottery is created, does that money go into the education fund? Absolutely it does, but it's offset with other dollars that we now have free. So does it mean it's more money that's going in there? No, it doesn't. But now we're finally, as a state, we were the only one in the union that did not require state employees to pay into their retirement. So thankfully, me included, as a state employer, are doing this, and I think it's the right thing to do.
Do you anticipate an increase? You said maybe it should have been 5%. Do you anticipate an increase in this next session?
I didn't mean. If I said maybe, I apologize. It definitely should have been 5%. Do I see that? I can't answer that. All I can answer is if it came up, I would absolutely vote for the 5%.
All right, very good. And thank you for the call, Megan. Glad you hung around for our video on demand interview. Appreciate that. As you look at things that are in front of you coming up, one of them that you mentioned had to be done was the budget, and redistricting is done. You mentioned things might be a little easier come budget time this year. Is that an opportunity to put other cuts into play, or have we cut it to the point where if we cut more, it's really going to hurt?
Absolutely not. I think we have the ability to, through redundancy as well as better management at the executive level, to provide more cuts for things that are not functioning to their desired effect, or things that, quite frankly, need to be changed. And I think what we can do is start to look at tax credit as well as tax cuts that will provide more revenue to the state than what they will detract. And I think that will be one of my focuses, is if we can provide opportunities that are going to initially cost the state a few dollars, but have direct measures and outcomes that we certainly can go forth with that. And a good example would be the tax credit for film. We have a cap on it right now, and the state of Louisiana and New Mexico have no cap. So where we see an initial debit of $25 or $50 million, we could bring in hundreds of millions of dollars if we allow these big productions to come to the state of Florida and do what we've done, quite frankly, in the past. We should not be losing to states like Louisiana and New Mexico for the film industry.
Very good. Well, last question I have for you this morning, John, something else that we covered on the air earlier is all these amendments that are on the ballot in November that's making this maybe the longest ballot in Florida history. I see it as an abdication of responsibility by the legislature, putting issues that should be legislated onto the Constitution and on the backs of the people, as opposed to the elected representative that we asked to make these decisions. Give me your view on that before we let you go today.
I think the process, without a doubt, needs to be changed. Not only the way in which these amendments end up on the Constitution, for voters' approval in the Constitution, whether or not we saw amendments 5 and 6, and I know you were strongly in favor of them, and I was strongly opposed to them, though we have abided by them. Me in particular, having to move to run for re-election. We saw large labor unions out of California have a direct impact of what makes it in our state constitution. So I believe that on both ends, not only that of the legislature, but that of many of these groups out there, we need to come to some sort of compromise and make it much more difficult to get on a whim almost, or with a few $1 million, things permanently put in our Constitution. The fact that it only takes a couple $1 million but lasts forever there. And remember, you can get rid of me or my colleagues every 2 years. You can't change the stuff in the Constitution without going back and changing the Constitution again. That's a real shame. It's ironic that you can run the country on only a few pages, but the diverse country in only a few pages, but the state Constitution is to a magnitude of 4 or 5 times that of the U.S. Constitution. It's almost a joke.
And lastly, for folks who want to check in and be able to take a look at your campaign or maybe contact you about issues, what's the best way for them to get information to you or about you?
You can simply email me at john@johntobia.com.
John@johntobia.com. John, thanks for taking the time this morning. Good to have you in here, and we'll see how things turn out in November.
Thanks so much.
All right, appreciate it. And that'll do it for this edition of the Video on Demand interviews here at WMMBAM.com. We'll see you next time.